Hey, welcome to In Dark Places, the best a man can get. We got a great show planned for you this week. We're talking about Ouija boards. Hey, Jimmy, what's going on?
Junebug, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year. I forgot
Happy
about that.
New Year, In Dark Places, listeners and personnel. Before we went on air, we were talking about as you get older, we're taking a lot of naps. And I was saying, like, my old uncle or grandfather, whatever, they'd be sitting in the recliner taking a nap. I'm like, you're so old. Like, don't you want to live life? Like, don't sleep. You're only going to live so much longer. And then we're talking about, like, if we live another 20 years, all of the aches and pains we're going to have, it's going to be even worse. So that reminded me of, I don't know why it reminded me of it, but do you remember the Guinness Book of World Records? Like, it was a big deal when you were a kid.
Yeah.
That big giant book at everybody's coffee table. And I just remember I got a vision for no reason whatsoever of the, they said, like, Herman Johnson was so fat when he died, they had to bury him in a piano case. And you're like, oh my God, it's terrible. And then I remember the picture that, and I'm like, why is it even popular? It was the two fat twins riding their motorcycles together. It said like Larry and Barry, two twins, between both of them weigh 1,080 pounds, riding their motorcycles together.
I always see those, like, Jerry Springer type things. They would be knocking the wall down to bring a crane in and get someone out of bed.
That's awful.
Yeah, that's no good. Don't do that to yourselves.
Stop eating. New year, new me.
Yeah, it's a good time to kick out those resolutions.
I'm not doing any resolution.
Yeah, I never fool with that either.
Just want to get through the day. So, you know what I have for you?
Yeah, what you got?
I have for you and the listeners, I have some scary movie celebrity birthdays that are coming up.
Yeah, cool.
And for the new listeners, these are celebrities that are having a birthday coming up that appeared in some scary movie. And I was trying to be fair. I was trying to get like men and women. And there was no ladies this month that I saw that were of interest, except Betty White. And as of this recording, Betty White has passed.
Yeah, very sad. Rest in peace, Betty.
And I was not allowed to, when I used to do the celebrity birthdays, I wasn't allowed to do Betty White because we had a curse where a lot of times I'd announce their birthday, if you remember, and then they die like the day after or 3 days afterwards. So anytime Betty White's birthday came up, Dave, the producer, would say, Jimmy, do not do Betty White. Don't kill her off. And so I wasn't allowed to do it. So guess what? I was writing these down for you the other day, and I told my daughters, I said, guys, I'm going to finally do Betty White's birthday. She goes, Dad, you're going to kill her off. I said, yup. And now I feel awful because I have her written on the paper, and 20 minutes later, they were screaming at me that they just saw it come across their news.
We have the photographic proof.
We do.
She was on the list. That happened like 4 or 5 times on Haunted Chronicles, though. It was crazy.
Oh, it got really bad for a while. The one I'm actually kind of proud of was Hugh Hefner came across the people that were had birthdays coming up. He has nothing to do with the paranormal, but I said, you know what, this guy is probably a little bit of a creeper. Well, he's definitely a little creeper, and I said, you know, he's had long enough of a life. He's a creeper. I said, let's kill him off. I said that. I have it. It's on recording. I said, let's kill him off. So we announced his birthday, and within the week, he's gone.
That's crazy.
All right, so I'll move on with these are regular people. Regular people. Scary movie celebrity birthdays. Number 1, January 3rd, Mel Gibson has a birthday. And he's an actor-producer known for Mad Max, Lethal Weapon, Braveheart, Signs, Apocalypto, Conspiracy Theory. Conspiracy Theory. Did you ever see that movie?
Oh, yeah, Conspiracy Theory. That's a good one.
That was so, at the time, everybody was like, oh my God, he's so crazy. It's like, no, it's real.
Yeah, I was into that. I like that one.
And
Signs, too. That was good.
Signs was real good. Apocalypto, I like that too. Anyway, Mel Gibson. How old is Mel Gibson? January 3rd.
For some reason, I'm thinking he is my dad's age, and my dad is 74.
Mel Gibson will be very sad to hear that, Jumbo. Mel Gibson will be 66 years old.
Oh, yeah, a little off.
But he's been around a long time. Number 2, on January 7th, Nicolas Cage, actor known for National Treasure, Face Off, Con Air, The Knowing, Valley Girl, etc., etc.
I should know this because he's my favorite actor.
Nicolas Cage.
Is he about 67?
Another dissatisfied customer. Nicholas will be 58 years old.
Wow. he's been around forever.
Wait. Let's give a shout out to our friend Dylan. Well, when we had Dylan on doing celebrity birthdays, remember he got some guy that was, I don't know, he's like 38 and he said he's 76 or something. I forget who it was.
That was C. Thomas Howell, Pony Boy.
It was funny. All right, I got 2 more for you. Norman Reedus, actor known for Blade 2, TV series Charmed, Mimic, Pandorum, Boondock Saints, and known for his role in AMC's Walking Dead as the character Daryl Dixon. How old will Norman Reedus be on January 6th?
I'm going to say he's about 52.
Very good. He's 52, be 53 next week.
Finally got one.
I got one more extra bonus. I was going to keep him off, but I said I think he deserved his spot. Bradley Cooper, who's in Midnight Meat Train, The Hangover, Limitless, American Sniper, 10 Cloverfield Lane, Star is Born. Bradley Cooper.
I am not sure. 50?
I was off on this one. That's a good guess. 47 years old. Still just a kid yet. And that does it for Scary Movie Celebrity Birthdays.
Yeah, hope none of those guys die.
Oh, please. They're going to be watching me if yeah,
we're talking about Ouija boards this week, and I thought I had a cool Ouija board story because, like, when I was on Haunted Chronicles back in 2017 or whatever, I was promoting my book that I had never written yet, In Dark Places, and I still have 3 chapters of that book written. I've never wrote any more in it, but like I wanted to tie all the stories. Like the common theme would be that I would have a story to go along with the episode. And my story for this week was with the Ouija board. I had a cool story of my sister. She was staying the night with her friend. And so the story goes anyway. This is the story she told me back when it happened back in the 90s. That she was staying all night with a friend, and they took the Ouija board and they got freaked out and they threw it in the dumpster out in the back of the house. And when they woke up the next morning, it was laying there at the foot of their bed. And I was like, oh no, it's freaky. And so like she stayed all night with her again, like a week or so later, and they took the Ouija board out and burned it. And then like the next day it was like back at the foot of her bed again and stuff. And I was like, whoa. But I messaged her last night. I texted her to try to verify the details so I didn't botch the story.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh no, we made all that crap up.
Oh no.
She said it kind of scared us, and we left it on one of our friends' porches that night, and we just never saw it again.
Do you ever see that there's some kind of joke that goes around the internet that somebody said that their boss at work said they just read The Exorcist for the first time ever, and it terrified them so much that they couldn't even get through the book, and they threw it off on the highway over the bridge while they were driving. They didn't want to see it anymore. And they said then the next day they bought a copy of The Exorcist and left it underwater and put it in their drawer. There's a lot of people that explain how the Ouija board works. Some people say it's only because of your subconscious moving the board, even though you don't think you're doing it, and it's a idiomotor thing. And it just because like somebody did a test on that, some people say, well, they did a test and they said that's how it works. And it's like it may work that way sometimes, but I also think it works in a real way other times.
Yeah, I
When
believe so.
but when I was a kid, me and my sister had one, and my our aunt died, and she was like our favorite old aunt, and we had so many relatives die when I was a kid. We had a big family, and we just didn't go to her. We didn't go to her funeral. I think we just went to the wake the night before or something like that. And so me and my sister were home, and we missed her, so we're trying to let's get the Ouija board out and talk to Aunt Margaret. So we're we're using it, and we said, where are you buried? Because we had no idea we're kids. We had no idea where she was buried, what cemetery or anything. So it's spelled out cemetery. It's like what cemetery, and it's spelled out Weaverdale. So we don't know what that is. So I called my grandmother up immediately. I said, hey, where's Aunt Margaret buried? And she said Beaverdale Cemetery.
Wow.
We had no idea.
That's
That was
wild.
kind of weird. Then another time, my sister was using the Ouija board with her friends, and we were in junior high school, and they were saying, "Hey, we're talking to a spirit in here," and then of course I had to say that's not real, it's fake. And as I was leaving the room, and you're just taking your normal strides to walk, like my foot that was lagging behind, like got stuck, like I couldn't pull it forward, like something was holding my ankle. And I pulled away from it and left the room. Stupid fake stuff. That was scary.
That's creepy. Yeah, those can really mess with people's minds too, like send them into like deep depression and junk. It's I've heard lots of bad tales on those.
Yeah, people are always going to debate how it works, but I have a collection right here of Ouija boards that people obsessively use that couldn't stop using that seem to cause hauntings in their homes. So who knows? But it's an interesting subject.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy, scary stuff.
You know what I just came across my desk?
What's happened?
Breaking news! This is called Woman Fed Up with Men Claims She's Fallen for Alien After UFO Abduction. So this Abby Bella, who claims to be some kind of actress or YouTuber or something, revealed recently that she was abducted by a horde of extraterrestrials who plucked her from her flat in Canary Wharf, London. But while most would have been utterly terrified by the experience of being kidnapped by aliens, the actor said she fell head over heels in love with one of her captors. Speaking to the Daily Star, thank you, Daily Star, Abby said she is over human men. She said, I am sick of men from Earth. I joked online about wanting an alien to abduct me. I then started dreaming every night of a white light. One night, a voice in my dream said, wait in the usual spot. So the next evening, I sat next to my open window, and as I drifted to sleep, a flying saucer appeared outside. There was a bright green beam which transported me to the UFO. So describing her abduction, Abby claimed that there were 5 aliens who were very tall and slender. She added that she instantly took a shine to one of them. There was one who connected with me, Abby told the publication. I felt the same. He said I had to consent to go with them, but I didn't want to say yes in case they took me forever. But it didn't last long. Abby was safely back in her London apartment after about 20 minutes. She now has an overnight bag at the ready should her alien soulmate come back for her. Abby says, I hope he comes back. I am willing to visit the Andromeda Galaxy.
Should be ready for him the next time.
Abby Bella. She says she's somebody famous.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of her before.
I never heard of her. I'm ready for a little nap.
Yeah, I believe I can use another one too.
All right.
And it's nappy time.
tonight we're going to share some stories associated with the Ouija board. First, let's, for those of you who don't know what a Ouija board is. The Ouija, also known as a spirit board or talking board, is a flat board marked with letters of the alphabet, the numbers 0 through 9, the words yes, no, occasionally hello and goodbye, along with various symbols and graphics. It uses a planchette, which is a small heart-shaped piece of wood or plastic, as a movable indicator to spell out messages during a seance. Participants place their fingers on the planchette, and it is moved about the board to spell out words. Ouija is a trademark of Hasbro, but it's often used generically to refer to any talking board. Spiritualists in the United States believed that the dead were able to communicate with the living and reportedly use a talking board very similar to a modern Ouija board at their camps in the U.S. state of Ohio in 1886 to ostensibly enable faster communication with spirits. Following its commercial introduction by businessman Elijah Bond on July 1st, 1890, the Ouija board was regarded as an innocent parlor game unrelated to the occult until American spiritualist Pearl Curran popularized its use as a divining tool during World War I. Paranormal and supernatural beliefs associated with Ouija have been criticized by the scientific community and are characterized as pseudoscience. The action of the board can be most easily explained by unconscious movements of those controlling the pointer, a psychophysiological phenomenon known as the ideomotor effect. Mainstream Christian denominations, including Catholicism, have warned against using Ouija boards, saying that they can lead to demonic possession. Occultists, on the other hand, are divided on the issue, with some saying that it can be a tool for positive transformation. Others reiterated the warnings of many Christians and cautioned inexperienced users against it. So we're going to share some stories about people that have used the Ouija board, and most don't end up well.
A creepy Christmas greeting. So this is kind of timely, because it was just Christmas time. I got a Ouija board for Christmas when I was in the 6th grade. That night, I went over to my best friend's house and brought the Ouija board with me. We went up to her room, sat on the floor, and asked, "Is there anyone in the room with us?" The planchette spelled out Ruth, which was my grandma's name, and my great aunt's name. Both my grandma and my great aunt had died that year. We threw the board back in the box and were totally freaked out. I brought it home, put it in my closet, but every time I looked at the box, it gave me a horrible, creepy feeling. So I ended up throwing it in the dumpster a couple years later.
Alright, this is a personal Ouija board story that was told to me. I taught a class called ghost hunting or paranormal. I called it a bunch of names, but I taught a class for about 10 years at the high school over here for adult education. And the janitor, who was in his early 20s, he was the night guy. He'd scrub the floors at night and stuff, and he always seemed curious what I was doing in there, because he'd walk by and poke his head in and wave every week. So one time when I was setting up the room, he came up to me and he says, I have a story for you. And he said when he was a teenager, his parents were dead set against Ouija boards, but him and a few of his friends in the neighborhood always wanted to play with one, so they said, we all went to Walmart and we bought a Ouija board, and they had a tent outside that they would only play in the tent or else their parents would kill them. So he said he'd got this man's name over and over again on the Ouija board. He said he died, but he wouldn't say how he was killed, and they talked to him over a period of weeks, and he eventually gave his exact home address, supposedly. And they're saying, like, how can we help you? And It spelled out, he wants his parents to know he's okay. So they eventually got enough nerve to go to the address, and they knocked on the door, and a woman came out, and they said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but we've been using this Ouija board, and this is what happened. And the woman started crying. They said, he wanted to tell you that he's okay. And she said, my son died in Iraq last year.
The story is called A Mysterious Death. My two friends, M and L, for this story, and I played with the Ouija board at M's house. It was going fine until M asked the spirit how it had died, and it said murder. She asked it how it had been murdered, and it said, not I. It gave its name as something older that I can no longer remember, and gave us a date in the 1800s. I started to get heavy. The whole room felt different, and this little thing on the board was ripped out of my hands and went across the room. That would be the planchette. We stopped playing immediately after that. M's mom died of cancer a week later. Very suddenly. Nobody knew. Probably a coincidence, but L's mom was hospitalized for a serious drinking problem. Not long after that, mine had an emergency hysterectomy the same week. I have since then experienced things that I don't think I would have without this experience. Voices, dark shadows, footsteps. I wonder if I'm haunted sometimes, still, and it's been 9 years.
We were hanging out in a friend's dorm room and busted out the Ouija board. There were a few of us who had used them before, and a few who hadn't that were quite skeptical. It was around 11 p.m., and the communication with the board was going quite well. Gary, one of the skeptics, kept calling hooey to the whole thing. We convinced him to sit on the floor with us and give it a shot. His first question, is this for real or just a bunch of hooey? He didn't really say hooey. I'm editing it for content, for our younger listeners. So he said, is this for real or just a bunch of hooey? The planchette zipped to no. Fine, he said, still not believing. Prove it. No sooner had he finished the statement when the lights in the room flickered and the building's fire alarm went off. This freaked us all out, and we left the room to follow fire alarm procedures. After about 20 minutes, campus safety said it was a false alarm and let us all back into our dorms. When we arrived back up to our friend's room, the Ouija board was gone. No one took it with us, and the room was left locked. The mysterious vanishing Ouija board.
This one is called Our Good Friend Roger. I was at a friend's house back in the early 90s. I believe I was in 9th grade at the time. There were 4 of us, myself and 3 other girls. They kept asking me if I wanted to play with the Ouija board because they'd been talking to some dude on it named Roger. I was totally skeptical at first. I wasn't buying it. Totally thought they were moving the planchette. Until I asked the board a question that only I knew. We had just got our grades from school back that day, and I asked it what I got in science. I remember this clearly, and I know my friends did not know the answer. The board spelled out my grade. Of course, that piqued my interest, so I started asking it more questions. I can't really recall the details of that night, other than the board kept calling one of my friends a bad name. It hated her. It liked me. His name was Roger, and he was stabbed to death. At one point, I was the only one controlling the board and asking questions. It worked. The freakiest thing that's ever happened to me. I'm not super spiritual, have never seen anything else paranormal related, and feel that I'm a very rational person. All I know is something supernatural was controlling that board, without a doubt.
I was about 12 or 13, spending the night at a friend's house, goofing around with the Ouija board with him and his sister. We were getting all sorts of gibberish, plus words spelled out, just kind of scaring ourselves for fun, not taking it very seriously. Then we got the message, "I can see through your window," and then, "I can see you through his eyes," or something like that. There was just a small window in the basement room where we were, and just the backyard and woods past the driveway visible through that window. We asked it more questions, and it said, "I'm under the car." So, we somehow got up the nerve to go out with a flashlight and peer under the car, where we saw a huge black stray cat hissing. We ran inside, freaking out, and at that exact moment, the power failed and all the lights in the house went out. We just about had a heart attack and had heart palpitations. A few minutes later, the power came back, and we sat up until dawn that night, scared, and never played with that board again.
My mom has warned me against using them due to her own experience. She used one at a friend's house when she was young. Nothing of consequence happened during the use of the board, yet she noted that whatever ghost they were chatting with seemed to be violent and have it in for her. She shrugged it off and left it in her car. On the way home, she hit and gruesomely killed a horse, which appeared out of nowhere, running at her car in the middle of a city in the afternoon.
When I was little, my mom took out a Ouija board and asked my brother and I if we'd like to play with it. It started out pretty funny. Someone was obviously moving the glass thing, making words like hooey and stuff like that. But then my mom said, "Let's get serious and try to contact someone." And here's where it got weird. A friend of hers had recently gone missing. He'd been missing for a month or so, and nobody knew where he was. When we asked who it was we were talking to, his name was spelled out. Let's just say it was George, since I genuinely don't remember. When we asked George if he was my mom's friend, he said yes. My mom got visibly upset and asked where he was. "In a lake," was spelled out. It was extremely upsetting, and we stopped immediately. Mom tried to be lighthearted about it, and since I was young, I believed it was no big deal as well, following her lead. About 2 weeks later, they found George's body. He'd been hit by some car or train or something on the bridge, and his body fell into the nearby lake. Though it was more like a very large pond, it was a reasonably remote place, so no one had found it for a while.
The spirit in the corner of the room. Once, right after my ex had lost his friend in an airplane accident, we took the Ouija board out to use it. She was very present. She was very scared and alone and desperate for communication. We stopped using it immediately. I felt this presence in the corner of the room. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Suddenly, the pointer started moving rapidly around and going too fast to spell out the words. It was terrifying. I refused to use the Ouija board again. I immediately felt exhausted, completely and utterly drained. I laid down and had a nap. I was asleep for exactly 30 minutes. I woke up, bolted out of bed. I closed my eyes for a second to adjust myself to where I was, and I saw this spirit/skeletal thing standing in the corner of the room. It suddenly rushed at my face and started screaming at me with a big gaunt mouth. I opened my eyes and started screaming at my boyfriend to get it off me. I could feel it, so oppressive and aggressive, trying to get on me. I ran from the house, screaming and shaking. I don't think I ever used the Ouija board again. One day it disappeared from my bedroom. It completely vanished. I never found it. I have no explanations for what happened to it.
This story is called The Creepy Doll. I have a terrifying story about a Ouija board. I got a call from my cousin who said that he, his brother, his dad, and his best friend were using a Ouija board in their basement. Prior to starting, they took a large porcelain doll out of the room because it was creepy and placed it in an adjacent room face down on a pile of towels. My cousin took a short break because the board was just spouting nonsense. His dad and brother and friend started asking the board questions without him. One of the questions was, who was in the other room? It just started spouting random numbers, and when my cousin came back into the room, his brother said it wasn't working and that they were going to put it away. And he showed him the answer to the last question he asked, and he said, "Dude, that's my social security number." Then they started to talk to whoever started spewing answers out. It told my cousin he would die in the Air Force. At this point, they tell the entity they're communicating with to prove itself. It then spelled out the word doll. They opened the door to check on the porcelain doll they had laid in the living room, and when they opened the door, the doll was standing upright in front of the door, staring right at them. Everyone freaked and ran out of the house. His best friend burned the Ouija board, and I think he temporarily went nuts for a few months, because my cousin, for some reason, then joined the Air Force and is on a base in Europe now. Creepy.
The figure at the window. When I was around 12 to 14, one girl brought a Ouija board to my friend's birthday/slumber party. I was pretty skeptical, but also really curious about it, as I had never used one before. We took turns asking questions, and I just figured someone else was moving the planchette. The other girls were pretty creeped out, but I wasn't until it answered a question for me that no one else knew the answer to. To this day, I can't explain how the answer appeared, or any of the other paranormal experiences that happened after we put the board away. I truly believe that we contacted something, and it stuck around. There were just generally a lot of small things, like footsteps above us when we were on the top floor. The door kept swinging open on its own, and the girl who lived there said it never did that on its own before then. The creepiest part was that a bunch of us randomly woke up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and a few girls saw a black figure walking down on the street outside the window. Apparently one of the girls had seen what they thought was the same figure with his face at the window, the same window on the second story floor, earlier in the night.
This story is called The Bookie. I was once working nights at a hospital for patients with severe mental issues. Very few of the patients were actually physically sick, so we often had very little to do throughout the midnight hours. So one night, somebody brought in a Ouija board, and a few of us huddled around it to ask questions of the spirits. I was very skeptical about it until a glass we were using suddenly flew off the table and smashed against a far wall. That was unnerving, to say the least, and I've never used one since. However, that's not really the story I wanted to tell you. That one belongs to my mother. My late mother was an absolutely no-nonsense woman who was not known for her sense of humor and certainly wasn't one to tell fanciful tales, so I have no reason to doubt her word. My mother was divorced when she met my father, and it was she who divorced her first husband, Frank. This was in the 1930s. Frank was a bookie and was often out of the house taking bets at places all over town. One night, when my mother had been left alone again, she decided to visit her friend down the road, who was a neighbor of hers. And they had a few drinks together, and then the woman brought out a Ouija board, and they decided to ask questions of it. My mother couldn't really think of what questions to ask, but finally decided to ask where her husband Frank was, knowing full well that he was at the office. However, the board replied that he was at the local dance hall. Freaking saying Frank has dancing shoes on, pomade in his hair, dancing willy-nilly. My mother was shocked and asked further questions. What's he doing? Who's he with? Etc. The board told her that he was there with a woman and further revealed that they were having an affair together. My mother, not one to sit back and do nothing, immediately grabbed her coat and dashed out to the dance hall, hoping, of course, that the board was not telling the truth. However, it had been, and my mother found Frank and his girlfriend there and confronted the pair. I could only imagine the scene she created. She immediately filed for divorce. From then on, she always blamed the Ouija board for destroying her marriage. No, I think it was Frank that destroyed the marriage. It was Frank.
Accurate death prediction. I was staying at a hotel with friends in northern Ontario for a chess tournament. Can't exactly remember the town. Anyway, we were looking for some thrills at night, and someone busted out a board. One of those official ones you can get from Toys R Us. We asked a few questions. I can't remember, but I will never forget when we asked it if it knew if any of us was going to die. Yeah, I know, a strange question to ask. So, it spelled out a person's name that was with us at the time, and then a date, which was approximately a year later. My friend died a year later from cancer in his knee. We knew about it 6 months before he died. Till this day, I'm still curious about the device, but I'll never touch it again.
Okay, we'll call this next story Demon. My stepdad is the kind of man that doesn't lie, ever. Which is why I believe his story about a Ouija board experience he had when he was younger. He said he had friends over and had a Ouija board and they wanted to play. After a bit of playing around, they made contact with a being that said it was a demon. His friends were asking it questions, but he said the thing pinpointed him. It told my stepdad it would visit him again later after midnight. What a treat. Thoroughly freaked, they put the board away. My stepdad fell asleep and with dead seriousness said he was woken up right after 12. Now the demon had told them its name by my stepdad, but he refused to tell me. He was genuinely afraid. Anyway, he said this thing woke him. It was sitting at the end of his bed, grinning. He said it was small and evil looking, just grinning at him. The thing told him his first child would die, and it left. My stepdad said afterwards that he tried to get rid of the board. He first threw it out with the trash, but it didn't work. He said a few days later, a little boy that he had never seen before in the neighborhood showed up at his door with the board. He handed it to my stepdad and said, "This is yours," and left. So now, super freaked, my stepdad tried to burn it, but it wouldn't catch fire. The fire kept dying no matter what he did. So he dug a very deep hole, put the board in it, placed a Bible on top, and buried it. He's not seen the board since. As far as what the demon predicted, it came true. His first wife miscarried at 3 months.
My first mistake was insulting it. My friend had mentioned that she had a Ouija board, so I asked her to pull the board out so I could check it out. At first, she said, "No." Oh, sorry. Overreacted there. But then she agreed to do it, as long as she didn't have to participate. After she had the board set up, I asked, "Is there anyone here?" And nothing. So, being a dumb teenager, I said, "If anything is in here and not talking, you're a coward." And the board was put away after that. Fast forward about a week later and have me sleeping upstairs on my couch. I wake up on a stereotypical stormy night. Thunder and lightning, wind and rain, the works. I look around to see why I woke up, and I couldn't see a thing, so I decided to try to fall back to sleep again. After laying there for about 30 seconds, I hear from downstairs, "Get the boy!" in a very raspy, wispy voice. I opened my eyes and listened, and nothing. I started to go back to sleep. "Get the boy!" It was much louder this time. Then my downstairs door slammed shut. And I freaked out because nobody slept down there, and we had no drafts.
The Exorcist is a classic 1973 horror film directed by William Friedkin. The film, which tells the story of a young girl who is possessed by a demonic force, is one of the highest-grossing horror films of all time, and critics praised it as being truly terrifying film experience. But many people don't realize that the popular horror film was actually inspired by a true story. Here's the real story behind one of the scariest movies ever made. In the late 1940s, a 13-year-old boy, commonly known by the alias Roland Doe, was mourning the death of his aunt. The aunt had taught him about spiritualism, including how to use the Ouija board. Roland's family notes that strange things started happening in their house shortly after the death of this beloved family member. In January 1949, the family reported hearing strange dripping noises and scratching sounds in the house. At first, Roland's mother believed the noises were connected to the dead aunt. So the family started trying to reach out to the spirits they believed to be in the house, hoping they could reason with them and ask to be left alone. However, this only made things worse. Roland claimed he could hear someone walking in his room at night when he was trying to sleep, and there were scratch marks found on his mattress in the morning. Eventually, scratch marks began also appearing on his body. Not knowing what else they could do, the family called the local minister, and after observing the boy overnight at the church, the minister suggested they reach out to the Jesuits. The family converted to Catholicism and tried to have Roland baptized, but the young boy responded to their Baptist attempts with unbridled rage. At one point, Roland was admitted to a hospital where a psychiatrist attempted to treat him, but was ultimately unsuccessful. From there, the family thought moving Roland to a different house might make the spirits leave them alone, but the strange events continued. The family was out of options, and so they called upon priests to perform an exorcism. Father Raymond Bishop was one of the priests who was called in for the exorcism. Bishop later wrote about his experiences. Another priest who came to assist the family was Father William Bodern. At one point, Bodern attempted to protect Roland through blessings and by putting a crucifix under the young boy's pillow. After leaving Roland to rest, the family returned to find furniture flipped over and the crucifix moved the edge of the bed. Roland's mattress was shaking uncontrollably. Priests performed multiple exorcisms on young Roland Doe. One was performed at Georgetown University Hospital, a Jesuit institution. Another took place at the Alexian Brothers Hospital in South St. Louis, Missouri. While the exorcisms were performed, young Roland vomited, urinated, spit, and spoke in Latin. Roland also took on a deep, adult-sounding voice that was unfamiliar. The final exorcism was conducted with the help of priests Walter Halloran and William Van Roo. At some point during the exorcism ritual, Halloran's nose was broken. In the end, the priests claimed that they were successful in exorcising the demons from Roland's body, and the young boy went on to live a normal life.
It spoke in Latin. Doing the board with 6 or 7 people, only one of my friends knows Latin, and he is not touching the oracle. The contact starts speaking to us in Latin. This same friend later pulled his hand back from the oracle, having received what looked like a small scratch on his wrist. Not bleeding, but bright red, as if fresh. His girlfriend at the time was plagued by a contact they had made and would wake with strange bruises on her legs.
Look what I found. 25 spooky Ouija board facts. Number 25. When first created, the Ouija board got its name after asking what it wanted to be called. Number 24. The pointer with the magnifying glass in the middle is called a planchette and actually has roots in Victorian seances. Number 23. Proprietor William Fuld gained exclusive rights to manufacture and sell the Ouija boards and amassed a grand fortune on their sales. The Ouija board told him to construct a new building, claiming to prepare for big business. And while overseeing its construction in Baltimore, he plummeted to his death in a freak accident. Number 22. The creator of the Ouija board, Elijah Bond, never received proper recognition for creating the board. However, in 2007, a collector and friend, Robert Murch, erected a Ouija board tombstone and put it over Bond's unmarked grave. Number 21. While using the Ouija board in 2015 on Christmas Eve, Paul Carroll was convinced his dog was possessed by a demon. In response, he killed his Bedlington Terrier and unsuccessfully tried to hide the fact. Authorities still ended up finding the body and arrested Carroll. Number 20. When the creators asked what its name meant, it replied, "Good luck." Number 19. Bill Wilson, founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, claimed that his 12-step program was guided by spirits and the Ouija board, specifically the spirit of the 15th century monk named Boniface. Number 18. Authors have written entire novels with the Ouija board. For instance, in 1917, author Emily Grant Hutchins claimed her work Jap Heron was dictated through a Ouija board by Mark Twain. Number 17. In 1994, Stephen Young was convicted by a jury for the murder of Harry and Nicola Fuller. How did the jury come to this conclusion? While locked in overnight at the Brighton's Old Ship Hotel, they used a makeshift Ouija board from paper and spoke with the spirits of Harry and Nicola Fuller. It replied, "Vote guilty tomorrow." Number 16. After using a Ouija board, Carol Sue Alvaker killed her son-in-law, Brian Roach, before driving off with her 2 daughters. She deliberately crashed the car to kill them all, but failed. So instead, she fled the scene, shedding all her clothes while running and hiding in the nearby woods. What's wrong with her? Number 15. In 1905, Frank Aulich divorced his wife Mabel and sued for custody over their daughter, claiming his wife was deranged and controlled by the Ouija board. He said she made all her decisions based on the board and conducted herself as such towards him and their daughter. Number 14. In 1990, 6 intelligence officers with top secret security clearances started dabbling with supernatural forces and found the Ouija board to be the most effective. They claimed spirits predicted the Gulf War and an earthquake in 1990. When the spirits told them they had to stop an impending cataclysm from happening, they obeyed and went AWOL, traveling to Florida to see a psychic about it. They were eventually arrested for going AWOL and honorably discharged. Number 13. Ouija boards were very popular during and after World War I, selling 3 million in 1920 and outselling Monopoly in 1922. They were in almost every household in America. Number 12. So, what changed? 2 words. The Exorcist. Upon its release in 1973, telling a story about a little girl who becomes possessed by demons through the Ouija board, people destroyed their Ouija boards in great numbers, feeling they saw its true nature. Sales also plummeted, and it's carried a negative stigma ever since. Number 11. Of course, The Exorcist isn't the only reason people feel worried about the game. Its rules clearly lay out its paranormal nature, stating that if you ignore the rules, you could be possessed by a demon. Number 10. The Catholic Church and Protestant Christianity have also widely criticized the board, calling it divination and tying it with the occult. Their influence, no doubt, caused many parents to throw out their children's boards. Number 9. There are other types of guidelines laid out about the game. Don't use the board in your home, alone, in a graveyard, under the influence, or while tired, lest you incur a spirit's wrath. Number 8. On the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, Norman Rockwell drew a picture of a well-dressed man and woman playing a Ouija board with each other while on a date, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Number 7. William Fuld told his children to never sell the Ouija board. Of course, they didn't heed his words and is currently owned by Hasbro. Number 6. The Ouija board has its predecessors. Mary Todd Lincoln, for instance, was said to practice seances and would consult her talking board to speak with the dead. Number 5. Ouija boards work, but not in the way you'd think. Many scientific studies have shown that through the ideomotor effect or unconscious involuntary movement, your brain answers your questions and they're revealed on the board subconsciously. There's some debate about that. Number 4. When family heirlooms went missing from her home, Helen Peters, an early investor and creator of the game, saw her family torn apart after she asked the Ouija board who took them, and it named a family member. The family never reconciled, and Peters sold all her stock in the company, saying to never play the game. Number 3. A mother and daughter pair took a cocktail of pills and started a session with the Ouija board. By the end, they burnt down their house in an attempt to take their own lives. Making it even weirder, they were related to Paul Carroll, the man who drowned his dog after using the Ouija board. Number 2. In 1933, Dorothea Turley and her 15-year-old daughter, Maddie, played the Ouija board game, and it told them to kill Maddie's father. Her mother said, "The board cannot be denied." Shortly after, Maddie followed through with the murder, and it became the first recorded murder, including a Ouija board, in known history. And let's see what they have for number 1 here. The Ouija board has also influenced matters of inheritance. In one such story, upon her death in 1955, Helen Down Peck left her $180,000 estate to John Gale Forbes, a man she met through the Ouija board. She believed he was in a mental institution somewhere, and if they found him, to give him the inheritance. If he wasn't found, she wanted to fund research into mental telepathy. And there's your 25 fun facts for the trivia for the freaking spooky Ouija board facts. I did that whole thing and messed it up at the end. Thank you.
I asked it how long I had to live. We all asked it a question that only one person asking would know the answer to. It would answer the questions. One question that somebody asked was, what was the name of the boat I went on a cruise on when I was 6? And it answered. We played with this thing forever. We had cold spot experiences and would place a candle where the cold spot was, and the candle would burn sideways, not straight up and down. One night we all asked it how long we had left to live, and this is where it gets scary. Everybody asked, and they had 50 to 60 years left. And I go to ask, and it says 10. I ask, 10 years? And it says days. So I was freaking out at this point. It said that I was going to be killed in a car accident by some girl named Emma. And we would ask it 3 days later, and it would say I had 7 days left. Ask it 2 days later, and it would say I have 5 days left, and so on. I'm freaking out at this point, carrying a Bible in my pocket and wearing a big cross. I finally tell my dad, and he doesn't believe me, so I made one out of a piece of paper and used a CD to show him. It worked, and he flipped out and told me that I didn't have to go to school that day, on the day that I was supposed to die. So I didn't go to school, and nothing happened.
Here's another Ouija board story for you. This one's called The Moving Skulls. My fiancée at the time and I were sitting on my bed with an old board that a friend found on the side of the road. We asked who was with us, and it said Mo. I asked, are you a demon, spirit, or angel? He said, demon by your creation. We were a bit freaked out, but we kept going. We asked more simple questions like, how many are with you? He replied, 7. What is your favorite poster that I have? It replied, bloody mess. I pointed at a kiss photo I had of Gene Simmons with his tongue out while blood was everywhere in and around his mouth. This one, I asked, and it replied, yes. After a few more questions, I asked him to move my skeleton heads that were on top of my TV because we wanted to know if this was fake or not. Mo replied, close your eyes. After a few seconds went by, all of my skeleton heads were facing us. How the hell could that be faked? We were the only 2 in my room at the time, and all the while sitting close to one another. Very scary.
I have no evidence, and I do not care if you believe me or not. I've used a board with results, and let something into my home, and have been physically assaulted by this entity. It started out with that feeling like you're being watched, and doors closing, and footsteps on the hardwood when you were home alone, and it progressed slowly into being kept awake by something shaking the bed, or pulling off your covers, sometimes even whispering your name. The board would disappear for days on end, and then show up in places you never would have put it. I became obsessed with it, and then it was a black mass in the corner of the room, or the silhouette of a man watching you from the doorway. And after that, it escalated pretty quickly. I had my hair pulled and my fingers pricked. I was scratched. I was choked, held down in the bed while this thing whispered in my ear in what could have only been Latin. We had our house blessed, and the bad thing hasn't shown back up. Just the normal occurrences now. But I will never again play with one of those boards.
This story is called The Boarding House. If you're from Louisiana, you probably have heard this tale before. There's a rumor that there used to be an enormous plantation house in the vicinity of New Orleans. It was owned by a mortician back in the early 1920s. When his wife died during childbirth, he turned the home into a boarding house, renting the rooms to people passing by. Distraught by the loss of his wife, he stopped working as a mortician and used his fortune to begin making improvements to the home. For nearly 6 years, he added many additional rooms, levels, and a series of twisting tunnels and cellars beneath the property. The strange thing is that many of the rooms appeared to remain unfinished. Doors would open up into brick walls, stairs would lead up to the ceiling, and long hallways would twist and turn only to abruptly end at a blank wall. In some rooms, there were like church-like pews facing windowless walls. Really strange stuff. Guests would sometimes literally get lost if they wandered much past the initial guest rooms near the home's entrance. Locals refused to stay at the home. Many would actually drive 3 miles out of their way rather than pass by the place. There were rumors of guests seeing moving orbs of light in their rooms, hearing voices, their clothes and items being displaced while they were sleeping, and being pushed and prodded by unseen hands. A lady in the local newspaper told a story about waking up in the night to find bite marks on her calf and thigh. Supposedly, there was photographic proof. When normally domesticated, tame animals were brought into the home, and they would suddenly snap and act startled for no apparent reason and become vicious. There were 7 cases of people ending their lives in the home within a short span of time, as well as numerous assaults. A particularly unpleasant incident involved newlyweds and a butcher's knife. After a while, the only people willing to stay at the boarding house were out-of-towners passing through. They didn't know any better, and I'm sure that many of them ended up regretting their stay. The place also became the holy grail of destinations for ghost hunters as well as skeptics. Now, I don't know much about the occult, but my grandma had quite a collection of Ouija boards, and she enjoyed using them. She would tell me all kinds of stories about contacting spirits and loved ones that had passed on. She never said anything negative about them at all. For her, they were a source of happiness. The one thing I do remember her telling me is that you always need to end a session after contacting a spirit. Never just stand up and walk away. The few times I used a Ouija board with her, she always insisted that we move the pointer to goodbye and thank the spirit for its time, therefore releasing it. Her theory was that if you didn't say goodbye, depending on what you've contacted, it might remain with the board for a time, or worse, some spirits may not be able to leave at all without first being released. From my limited reading on the subject, a powerful spirit can do as it pleases, but there are limitations and rules that some spirits must follow. Besides, not saying goodbye is simply bad form. Back to my story. The mortician eventually died, not long after he'd completed the additions to the home. The local community leaders immediately had the boarding house closed and demolished. This is where the story gets interesting. As they were tearing down the home, they discovered Ouija boards hidden within some of the walls in the new additions that he'd built. And they weren't the typical William Fuld boards that were sold at the time. They were highly customized, inscribed with unknown symbols, and made out of thick wood. In some areas of the home, there were many as 4 or more boards within the same wall. The really strange thing is that on all of them, the goodbye had been chipped off. According to my grandma, if you want to trap a low-level spirit or demon, the best way is to invite it to the board and then remove the goodbye. A group of psychics supposedly visited the place after their boards were discovered. One theory is that the man, stricken with grief, tried to contact his dead wife through the Ouija board. Believing he was successful, he tried to bind her spirit to that place so they'd forever be together. He soon discovered that whatever he'd contacted was not his poor wife. He began to obsessively try over and over again, eventually driving himself mad. The place ended up being turned into a cemetery in an attempt to put the souls there to rest, which I think is quite fitting.
Our first mistake. My wife and I had some unexplained things going on in the house we were renting. So we got a board so we could try to figure out what we were dealing with. Bad idea. The board was just a standard plain board. We used it one night to speak with, hopefully, our spirit. What we didn't realize is that Ouija boards open the door for anything to come through and speak. The looking piece, planchette, fell off the board near the end of our session, and we had no real answers to anything. We were speaking with something, but it was very evasive with its answers. Things got worse in the house, and we eventually broke our lease and moved. Radios and TVs were going on by themselves, and water running. After the board, though, things got bad. Voices, moving objects, and my wife says I got possessed one night, but I can't validate that as I was asleep. Hey, speaking of sleep, I could use another nap right about now. So, I think we'll close it here. What do you say, Jimmy? Oh no, Jimmy's already asleep. Yeah, I want to take me a nap. We appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you again here next week. God bless you, and see ya.